This is 10 reasons why you'll regret moving to Australia. G'day guys, my name's Ross and I moved to Australia with my family during a global pandemic. Since moving to Australia and calling this beautiful country home, I'm on a quest to dig out all of these different videos telling you why Australia is such a crap place to live. So far I have no regrets moving to Australia, so let's see how many of these 10 reasons are actually any good.
In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the top 10 reasons why you may regret moving to Australia. And wait till you see the number one reason that we're going to be showing in this video. Something you would never even have thought of, so make sure you watch till the end.
I'm struggling to find one reason why I regret moving to Australia. This guy thinks he's got 10, and apparently one of them's really interesting. Well, I'm interested now. Let's see what you got, mate.
So Bonza, mate, let's cut to the chase.
So Bonza, mate, that's absolutely terrible. And I think that's the point. This geezer doesn't sound very Australian. Apparently some people can hear my voice changing. Is it becoming more Australian? Let me know in the comments down below. This guy's voice hasn't changed one bit.
At number 10, the weather can be really quite upsetting.
Really quite upsetting. Like it's gonna hurt your feelings or something. Mate, the weather is just the weather. That's it.
Australia is a land of extremes. In some parts of the country, the seasons can be described as hot,
It's bloody
really
hot here.
bloody boiling, really hot. The summer of 2017, for example, was one of the worst I have ever experienced. Extreme humidity, with the temperatures going over 40 degrees Celsius every third day or so. My bedroom had no
was
air
stupid.
conditioning, which made the nights really fun. Yet it does get properly cold in the winter, especially down south, and particularly in Tasmania, where the climate is more European, or more like New Zealand's.
Ragging on New Zealand there for a terrible climate apparently. But on a serious note, this guy sounds a bit weird. It's like he's talking to be cool and down with the kids, but in reality he's posh as. I'm smelling something fishy. Why does a guy who sounds like he's so posh he wipes his ass with lobsters? I learned that one recently. Aussies don't do their money with rhyming like I'm used to. Instead it's simpler. They just do it by colour. Beautiful. Anyway, how can someone this posh not have aircon?
In the
Something
northern parts
isn't
of the
quite
country,
right
they
here.
have just two seasons, the wet and the dry.
That's because it's
The dry
tropical,
is
my
during
friend.
winter time, when the temperatures are manageable. Think mid-late 20s, early 30s. Australia too is a country liable for natural disasters. Cyclones,
As is
floods,
everywhere, I think.
bushfires, drought,
We just get a
all
few
things that
more
Australians
here.
have to contend with. These events are scary. They kill people.
They kill people. This is the face of killing people.
With a changing climate, it's a bit worrisome to think about the future, where extreme weather events are concerned. I do not hate Australia or living in Australia. I also don't really need any aspect of why Australia is the way it is man-explained to me.
Man explained to me. Listening to him speak is like reading one of my kids' English essays. I'm looking into this. Trip Extreme. I knew something was fishy. What's worse than whinging Pom? Anyone who's dogging on this beautiful country that I call home. I wonder what else this guy's got to say. I don't even know if it's a guy anymore. It could be a girl. Obviously not the voice actor. He's been paid.
I've lived here for most of my life. I'm fluent in how this country functions. There are certain elements of
This
living
makes
here
me
that
angry.
aren't great. However, you could say that about any country of the world. Australia is not the best damn country in the world, as some may claim, because nowhere is perfect. After living away from the country for a spell of time, or coming to live here in the first place, you may regret moving to Australia. I personally think life down under is pretty good, most of the time. You may not necessarily regret moving to Australia.
I feel like this guy too. I'm confused with all the crap that he's been saying. But in the spirit of redemption and forgiveness, I'm willing to see what he's got to say. Because at the moment, all he's got is the weather. Ooh.
At number 9, the internet is pretty awful. There was once this dream of having fibre optic internet
Yeah,
in Australia.
the internet is
It was an
pretty
ambitious
awful.
idea. It's 2021 as I write this. I live in the second largest city in the country, and I don't yet have access to the national broadband network.
You don't live in the second largest city in the country, mate. I don't even know where you live. But it's not in Australia. But it's not great, but it'll do. And I think you'd have to be pretty sad to move to the other side of the world and take everything that Australia has to offer and then sit in your bedroom and cry about how slow the internet is. It's not that slow. I'm old enough to remember dial-up.
Next up at number 8, it's isolated, both geographically and metaphorically. Australia
love
is a very
recycling these
self-contained
things, don't they?
place. This sense of isolation is perpetuated by our media.
I have noticed that a little bit about the media in Australia. It is very Oz-centric. But to be honest, wherever you live, they're going to do local news. They're going to focus on that country.
It's nice in some ways, as you can feel quite safe living here, which is something that should not be taken for granted. On the other, we should care about what's happening in the world quite simply because we are actually part of it.
If you care that much and you want to have a look at what's happening in the rest of the world, just look at the really slow internet.
Number 7. Travelling abroad is an expensive and time-consuming endeavour. I didn't step foot outside Australia until I was 20 years old, and I'm not alone in this. Most of my friends were in the same boat, unless they went on exchange, saved up to travel during university breaks, went to Bali for their end-of-school celebrations, or had their families take them abroad on holiday. And those who did go overseas mostly had just travelled to cheap destinations in Asia or New Zealand. European friends, on the other hand, who flit through countries and languages on the regular, are surprised by this. But whilst you can travel from, say, London to Rome for £9 return trip...
What? London to Rome for £9? Are you having a laugh? If you go to some places in London, you can't even buy a beer for £9. I think you're a little bit off there, my friend.
You're not going to see the same for Sydney to Bangkok. Plus, an 8-hour flight to a destination from Australia is considered to be on the short side. Unlike Europe, it's not like you can jet off to Singapore for the weekend. Well, you could, but it would be a waste of time and money.
I don't think jetting off to Singapore is ever really going to be a waste of time and money.
Next up at number 6. Travelling within the country is also quite expensive. So why not stick to travelling within the country then? This is what many Australians tend to do. However, the price of doing so can be alarming. In the 90s, Australia was considered a budget destination for backpackers and people who are my age now, in their 30s.
Mate, if this guy is in his 30s, he has not aged well. He sounds like he's got grandkids.
In the bigger cities, governments are throwing money at large-scale infrastructure programs, but they're throwing it at our roads rather than public transport. Australia is one of the most car-reliant nations in the world, and it seems like nothing will be done to combat this anytime soon.
I've heard that public transport in Australia can sometimes be a bit hit and miss. Thankfully in Brisbane, where we live, it's not actually too bad. If I'm comparing it to public transport where I came from in the UK, that wasn't exactly great either. The same distance on a train journey from here into the centre of Brisbane, if I was comparing it trying to get on any train into London, during peak hour is probably about 4 times as expensive in the UK. And I never got a seat either. While I agree that not all of the public transport in Australia is exactly the same, and it seems that most people are very car-centric, I don't know of many people who have moved anywhere in the world just for the public transport infrastructure. Yay, I've moved to Australia to live out my dreams, but the trains are a bit shit.
Number 4. The cost of living has risen considerably. Australia's booming economy has had its drawbacks, with the cost of living rising considerably over the last couple of decades. The median house price in Sydney has been $1 million Australian dollars for years, finally dipping this year. Young adults find themselves having to live at home well beyond the length of time that both they and their parents find tolerable in order to survive.
We're going to kick out your kids.
There's a very real chance we are heading into recession, which we were lucky enough to avoid during the global financial crisis of 2008.
The cost of living is going up everywhere. If you're in the UK right now, I honestly don't know how you're going to be paying your energy bills this winter. The good thing about Australia in comparison to most other places in the world is we get paid a fair wage. And I, for one, would rather get paid more for what I do and then have to pay a little bit more on the cost of living than get paid nothing and they're still going to put the prices up anyway.
And now, number 3, racism. Well, it's here, but then it's everywhere. Hello to the elephant in the room.
This is the first time I've seen someone tackle the racism
it's a bit of a tough
subject.
Question to answer. I would say yes, there are racist people in Australia, yet there are also many people living here who are friendly and inclusive. It's not really fair to paint an entire country with one brush, especially when many other countries are also prone to similar crappy behaviour.
It's not really fair to paint an entire country with one brush, yet apparently this is one of the reasons why you're going to regret moving to Australia.
I can only really use my own experience as an example. I'm a dinky-die Aussie born and bred, going back generations on my dad's side. I'm 100% fluent in Strine, and I'm sitting here typing this out in my tracky dacks and Ugg boots.
Strain, mate.
There are racist people in Australia, sure. They're everywhere and probably enjoying their time in the light at the moment.
I remember the first time I experienced racism in the UK. I was about 8 years old and someone told me to go home. I think the unfortunate nature of it is that there are assholes everywhere. I'm sorry that you've experienced racism, bud, but you've said it already. It's not fair to tar the entire country of beautiful, wonderful people with the racism brush.
Number 2. Australian politics kinda suck. If you're even slightly into politics, you'll either find Australian politics the most interesting thing ever, or a cause to cry into your pillow every night. From 2013, the opposition coalition government played musical chairs with the Prime Minister's seat, giving us 3 more PMs in 5 years. They shockingly won the most recent election despite having a pretty piss-weak climate action plan, wasting money on a plebiscite to legalise same-sex marriage, committing constant human rights violations in offshore detention centres, and approving a coal mine in Queensland that would cause severe damage to the local biodiversity and harm the already endangered Great Barrier Reef.
The UK politicians aren't much better. I think if you dig deep enough into any country's politics, you're going to find a few skeletons in their closet.
In general, we seem to be moving backwards as a country rather than forwards. Ironic when you consider our national emblem, which features an emu and kangaroo on it, animals chosen for their inability to walk backwards.
Is that a thing? Kangaroos and emus can't walk backwards? Never knew that. If that's true, this is the first thing that this video has actually taught me. Thank you, whoever you are.
And finally, at number 1, the treatment of the First Nations population could be a lot better. It is or should be well-known knowledge that the treatment of the indigenous population by the British was horrendous. Families were ripped apart through attempts of assimilation, which led to the stolen generations, where children were forcibly taken from their families, some never to see each other again. Much of this is living memory, with many Aboriginal Australians living today still having memories of life on missions operating as recently as the late 60s. Today, there are many misconceptions about life as an Aboriginal person in Australia. There are many Australians who identify as being Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, and for Australians of other backgrounds, interaction with Aboriginal cultures can be limited, which is sad. They're fascinating and ancient cultures that should be preserved and cherished.
When I first started working in schools in Australia, I also started my education about Australian First Nations people. And I think it's important for us to continue to pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. I love learning about Indigenous culture. It's fascinating. And I suppose this is one of the first things that I do agree with, because it's important to learn more about other cultures. Preserved and cherished. But I swear that sign behind is Afrofest? Yet again, this is another one of those bogus videos about why Australia is a terrible place to live. It's not. It's fantastic. It's a beautiful country with lots of different beautiful people. Sure, he has highlighted some bad bits about the country, but I think they're bad bits about every country too, mate. I can't really trust the voice of people who haven't really lived and experienced what it's like to be here. If this video puts you off moving to Australia, or even if you're here, makes you regret moving or living here, well, I'm glad international travel has just opened up for you, and you might want to go and have a look for a ticket. Thank you for watching the video. If you've enjoyed it, please make sure to give us a like. If you want to have a look at the rest of our life and what it's like actually living in this beautiful country, then make sure to subscribe to our channel. And if, like me, you have a sick perversion for watching videos about people who dog on about Australia, then watch this video here. It's another one of those weird ones.